Welcome to Deconstructing the Culture here on this special podcast and interview. I am so excited to introduce you to Abby Johnson. Abby worked for Planned Parenthood for 8 years before working her way through the ranks to become the clinic director for a clinic in Bryan, Texas. She was Planned Parenthood's Employee of the Year in 2008, but then she walked away from her job after witnessing the abortion of a 13-week-old fetus during an ultrasound-guided abortion. She then left Planned Parenthood and became a national news headline for leaving those ranks, which led to a pro-life speaking career. In 2012, she founded And Then There Were None, the only ministry in the nation that helps abortion workers leave their jobs and find new ones out of that industry. To date, she has helped nearly 500 abortion workers quit their jobs in the abortion industry. Her best-selling book, Unplanned, was made into a feature film that debuted in theaters nationwide March 2019 under the same name, and she and her husband, Doug, have 8 children. Abby Johnson, thank you so much for being here today.
Of course. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and dive right in, and my first question is a little odd, but I gotta know, your life's a movie. I mean, I'm sure that there's maybe a day when you're just like, pinch myself, is this real? I'm curious, is there been anybody either who read your book or watched your movie that you were like, oh my gosh, that person, I'm fangirling, they read my book or watched my movie?
Let's see, probably the only person I've been, probably the only person I've been like, whoa, that was cool. I mean, there's been a lot of people that, it's been like, oh, that's neat. Like, I can't believe they read it, or I can't believe they even like know about it, or, I mean, the fact that, President Trump like knows who I am and like knows my story. That's pretty cool,
Yeah.
But probably like the guy who I was like, whoa, was Jim Caviezel, who played Jesus in The Passion of the Christ.
Oh my gosh, wow.
So he's like a super just like humble, holy man. And he's like Jesus, right? He was like Jesus in The Passion of the Christ. Like, he's an amazing guy. And and so he actually watched the film, and I was just like, wow, like fake Jesus watched my movie. Cool.
Oh, I love that. Fake Jesus watched your movie. I'd fangirl if Fake Jesus watched my movie too.
Yeah,
so
it's pretty cool.
Okay, so on that topic, a lot of people have been wondering and asking me when I ask my audience, what do you want to know from Abby Johnson? A lot of them have asked actually if your children have watched Unplanned, and also at what age do you talk about abortion with your children? Because I know you have 8 children there, various ages. Your oldest is older, and your youngest are little tiny, a couple months old.
So my kids are 12, 7, 6, 5, 4, 2, 2, and then Fulton is almost 3 months. So I have a lot of littles. And my daughter Grace, though, who's 12, she did see the movie. My kid, people ask me that a lot, like, when do you start talking to your kids about abortion? I mean, my kids grow up with, hearing about the sanctity of human life pretty much every day in our home, because it's what their mom does, right? So they hear the word abortion growing up. But they also are active in the movement with me. So we take them to pro-life rallies. I take them to the Capitol when they're small. When we're in session, pro-life bills are being passed. They go with me out on the sidewalk to pray. So it's really just about how you do it. So, Grace was 3 when she first went to the sidewalk with me, and she asked, like, what are we doing? Why are we here? And when I take my kids, I always bring like some things for them to do, just like coloring books or like puzzles or pipe cleaners or, things like that for them to play with. But we always, spend the first couple of minutes just praying together as a family. And, when they're really small, I just sort of explain it to them in a way that they can understand. So, there's women going in and they're pregnant and they have babies in their tummies. And, we are out here to pray for them and to pray that their babies are safe and that their mommies are safe. I mean, that's sort of, just how we start the conversation. And then as they get older, they start asking more and more questions, like, well, why are they why aren't they, are they not safe? Like things like that. It's, all of our kids, when they first hear what abortion is and, that it's actually like taking a life of a baby, it's something so unfathomable to them. I mean, they're just like, why would somebody do that? Like, why, that's crazy. Like, why would anybody do that? And so it also is an opportunity for us to really instill in them justice, but also grace. So, helping them understand that, even the moms that have abortions, we still love them. We still pray for them. But you've got to, your kids need to see you doing something in the movement. It's one thing to say you're pro-life or to say, oh, we're a pro-life family, but that doesn't really stand out to your kids. What stands out is what they see you doing, the behaviors that they can emulate. And so if you are praying for an end to abortion, as a family, if you are praying for moms who are, struggling with their pregnancies, if you are volunteering or donating to pregnancy centers and they see you doing that sort of thing, you're going out to clinics, they see it. It's just, you don't have to have a big talk about it because the value of life is something that's instinctive for them. It just makes sense to them, and they see you living that out as valuing life, and it just comes really natural. And so then it becomes a very natural conversation.
No, absolutely. I mean, they're going to look at your actions more than what you say. So that absolutely makes sense. You mentioned going to the fence, and I love that you brought that up because something that you've talked about in your book, and I just want to say the first time I read your book, it broke me. Oh my gosh, I've never cried so much through a book. So thank you for bringing that to the world. But something, because you have the perspective of being on both sides of the fence, first on the Planned Parenthood and abortion clinic side, and then the pro-life side, what would you say are some of the things that pro-lifers do and say that really kind of make you cringe or feel like are counterproductive to the pro-life movement? Or some things that you would change, maybe some language or actions you would change.
Okay. So, the culture that we live in today has really left fertility and pregnancy solely on the shoulders of women. And so when I hear people say things like, well, she should have kept her legs closed or something like that, I'm like, really? Because there was another person involved too, right? And that's not empowering a woman in that situation, right? Admonishment of sin is important at the right time, not when a person is vulnerable, not when you don't have a relationship with them. Just coming out and being like, oh, well, you were terrible, you had sex and you shouldn't have had sex, so that, and I see that, like, people laugh and like think that, oh, that doesn't happen. It happens all the time. I see it literally every day. Literally every day of my life, I see a comment, at least one comment from a pro-lifer saying that woman should have kept her legs closed. That is not a good argument to win people over. And it's not a good argument to show people that you care about women, that you care about women after they're pregnant. It's really just sort of like this old school, like, punitive argument. And that's really not what we should be about. Yes, we want to draw people in. Yes, we want to help them become an advocate for good choices, and but they're not going to do that if we're constantly just wagging our finger at them and telling them how wrong they are. I see a lot of pro-lifers say things like, every woman regrets her abortion, things like that. And that's not true. I know women who have had abortions and do not live with regret. Maybe they will eventually, maybe they won't. So I don't think that we need to put ourselves in a place where we are speaking for all women. I think that we always need to be people who are really ready to listen to other people, particularly women who have had abortions. We may not agree with the decision that they made. We may be incredibly against it, but women don't have abortions alone. They don't have them in a vacuum. There's usually some sort of reason that they felt like abortion was their only decision to make, their only choice to make. And I want to hear what that was, because I want to create a culture for them where women where they don't feel like they're backed into a corner, where they don't feel like they have to choose abortion. So I think, I just think it's important that we listen. I think, sometimes pro-lifers make a lot of assumptions, as do pro-choicers. A lot of people making a lot of assumptions about each other, and assumptions never bring about dialogue or fruitful conversation. It just becomes like a back and forth, and that never wins anybody over when we're just constantly arguing and fighting.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I'm going to be totally transparent. I feel like I have been that pro-lifer who's made those inappropriate comments, and it really hasn't actually been until I went to your pro-life women's conference this last summer that I realized I was using some language that was not helpful to the pro-life movement. I cringe to think about it now. I have made on my Instagram posts like, hey, if you are not ready to have a child, you are not ready to have sex. Well, maybe that's true. Not particularly convincing to anyone, and it's definitely maybe not the most compassionate thing. So I appreciate your willingness to talk about the fact that the pro-life movement does have issues. We do need to work on our messaging and figure out actual ways to help women rather than telling them how they're doing it all wrong.
Look, I have always said I'm going to write a book and call it "We've Got Issues." But it's not just you. I mean, I've said things before where, like, I'll write something out and I'm like, that wasn't nice, but I mean, I think it's very normal because we're dealing with life and death here. And so it's very normal to get wrapped up in emotion. I mean, it happens to me too. It happens to everybody. So I think it's very easy just to sort of get wrapped up in that and to feel angry, and to be like, hey, women, like, and I'm not saying that and look, I mean, I do think that there is a responsibility that women have to protect themselves. I think that I don't believe in this whole like, I don't know, this is probably gonna get me crucified, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Like, women, I see women walking around, like the other day I saw this woman. I live in Austin, okay? It's a big city. I saw this woman, it was like 11 o'clock at night. She's like jogging by herself in this not so great area of town. And I'm like looking at her like, what are you doing? you know, and then God forbid something happened to her and she was assaulted. We can't, as people, say, well, I mean, of course it was wrong that she was assaulted, but we also have to take precautions. Like, God gave us a brain, right? So
Mm-hmm.
my brain is going to tell me, don't go jogging in a dangerous part of town after dark, you know? And so I don't think that's wrong to put that out there. Women do have the ability to control our bodies and to say, no, dude, we're not going to have sex. I'm not interested in getting pregnant. I'm not interested in the consequences that could be brought forward because of my sexual behavior. Like, we are the gatekeepers to our bodies, right? So I think that we do have a responsibility there. But it, you know, I think that part of what's happened is that we don't hold men responsible at all when it comes to fertility and pregnancy. I mean, when I got pregnant the first time, I had an abortion with my first pregnancy, but I remember when I got pregnant and I went to my boyfriend and he's like, well, did you not take your birth control?
Wow.
Like, yeah, I took my birth control, but like, why is this on me? And that's what's happened. That's what's happened because of this like birth control culture that we live in, because of this sexual culture that we live in, the abortion culture we live in. Women are seen as the only people that have responsibility over their fertility, and fertility is meant to be shared between two people. It is not the responsibility of one person. And so when I hear people say things like that and putting all the responsibility on women, I'm just like, hey now, like, let's not throw it all on her shoulders. Like, where are the men? They're also responsible. You know, who's telling them, well, keep it in your pants, right? That's not near as often an argument that we hear in comparison to what we hear about women.
Absolutely.
So, but it's all just sort of like systemic. We live in this broken sexual culture. It's all systemic. And, but I mean, we are protectors of our own body, of our person. And so we need to take that seriously, particularly before we engage in sex with some guy. I mean, God's plan for women and for men was to be married before you have sex, right?
Agreed. Absolutely.
That was the plan. There was a reason that was the plan, because his plan works. I was filling out the birth certificate for my youngest son. And, you know, I'm not trying to like make fun of anybody or anything, but like, I was looking at the form for the birth certificate form, and it was like, it was so confusing. Okay. So I fill out my part, the mother's part, and then I get to this section about the father. And it's like presumed father, biological father, if a paternity test has been requested, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what in the world? Like, my husband is the father of my baby. I just want to write his information down. Like, I had to ask the lady at the birth certificate office, like, can you help me? I want to make sure I did this correct. I don't know that I checked the right boxes. It should not be that difficult to fill out a birth certificate for your child. But because we live in such a broken world where sexuality has become so perverted and so out of line with what God prescribed for us, you know, we have those sorts of things now, you know, and we have situations where we have a biological father, we have a presumed father, we have a father over here, we have a father, you know, we have somebody that's raising the baby, it's not his baby, it's just,
and none of that was ever part of God's plan. That wasn't
never.
You didn't follow the blueprint, so it didn't turn out quite the way it was supposed to. It doesn't look quite the way it's supposed to.
Exactly.
If you don't mind, can we go back? Actually, you mentioned your abortion, and I understand, and a lot of people who have watched your movie or read your book understand you had 2 abortions. Quite a few of our listeners have had abortions, and I was just wondering, what would you tell our listeners who have had abortions and are maybe struggling with forgiveness when to themselves over that issue.
Yeah. That's it. Like, that's the hardest part, right? Is forgiving ourselves for our past. And I was one day after I left Planned Parenthood, I was watching Kung Fu Panda with my daughter. And there's this part where there's this like wise old turtle in it. And he's talking to another character and he says, "Do you know why today is called the present? Because it's a gift." And as I was sitting there watching this movie with my daughter, I just thought to myself, wow, like this is a gift. Every day that I wake up, it's a gift. And so I have to decide what I'm going to do with that gift. Am I going to live in my past? Am I going to live in my past sins, the place that I cannot change? I cannot change anything about my past. It's done. It's over. And I believe that that's where the enemy lives, because he likes to throw up, our past transgressions in our face. Or am I going to live for today? Am I going to embrace this gift and give my past to God and say, do with it what you will? And it took practice. Honestly, every day from that day on, I had to wake up and make a decision. I had to wake up and make a conscious decision. And sometimes I made the wrong choice. Sometimes I did choose just to wallow around for the day and relive who I was over and over again. But eventually I would wake up and I didn't even have to make the choice any day. I didn't even have to make the choice anymore. I would wake up and I would just know I want to live in the day that God has created for me today. And I'm going to take I'm going to take the person who I was and I'm going to give it to him. And I'm going to let him use it and shape it for his glory and what he wants to do. My faith has been essential to my healing. And I think it's almost like it's almost prideful for us to say, "Oh, that's too big for God," right? Because nothing is too big for him. That's our own pride telling God what he can and can't do. And that's just silly, and he wants to take that from us. And but it's hard sometimes to let it go. But it took me practice, and doesn't mean that every day is easy. Doesn't mean that I don't have setbacks sometimes. That's just being human, right?
Yeah.
But it works if you just keep moving forward and you keep waking up every day with that knowledge in your head that today is a gift.
I think that's beautiful advice, honestly. And even for those who were in that same position as you, where they worked at a Planned Parenthood clinic or any abortion clinic. And that is beautiful. So thank you for sharing that. And I am wondering, this is kind of off in a different direction, but have you had any chance, I know you said you were praying about it and praying for Lena Wen. She was the recently fired president of Planned Parenthood. Have you, by any chance, or your organization have made any contact with her?
We haven't. I reached out to her privately and publicly. Our ministry reached out to her privately and publicly. We have not heard anything. She's gone very quiet during this time. I think that, she did just recently lose a child to miscarriage. I think she's probably just probably taking some time, just to find her footing. And then this, 2 weeks after she miscarries, this huge betrayal from Planned Parenthood, from people that she, thought were her friends. So it's a lot to take in. It's a lot to heal from. But we just keep praying for her. And, I do pray that she finds clarity on the issue of life, and whether she contacts us or not. I am praying for her every day.
Okay. Well, I do understand that you have had contact actually with another former Planned Parenthood director who left 2 years ago, and there's been a major win against Planned Parenthood. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, we've been working with a woman named Myra Rodriguez for quite some time now. She filed a lawsuit against Planned Parenthood for wrongful termination. She has completely had a conversion, and she's 100% pro-life now. She worked at Planned Parenthood for 17 years, was a director there. Ended up getting fired from Planned Parenthood, which she says was like the biggest blessing ever.
Yeah, probably right from God, and not even.
Yeah, I mean, it really caused her to look into what was going on. She fired them. She is seriously, like, one of the bravest people I know. She actually, the entire 17 years that she worked at Planned Parenthood, she was an undocumented immigrant. And when she's now in the process of gaining citizenship.
Wow.
But when she filed her lawsuit, she was not. She was an illegal immigrant. And I was concerned, because I said, Myra, if you show up to that courthouse, if you file this lawsuit and you show up to that courthouse, you're probably going to be deported. And I'll never forget it. She just said to me, well, I hope that doesn't happen. But if it does, at least I know that I did the right thing.
Wow, that is a huge sacrifice ahead of time.
She said, I have to expose what's going on there. And then so she filed, and then in the meantime, started the pathway to citizenship. And so she's now almost there, where she will be a naturalized citizen. But she's in like the non-deportation status or whatever. And so when she went to court, she was safe. But I was like, what faith, just to say, look, I've got to do the right thing, and I know the consequences could be dire for me, but I just got to do it. And so she was there. The trial was 2 weeks long. We had people from, and then there were none from my organization there during the trial. And it was nasty. A lot of stuff came out about Planned Parenthood. A lot that we're going to be releasing. We're getting all the court transcripts, releasing those. But yeah, she ended up getting a verdict in her favor. Her attorney told the jury, we're not going to ask for a specific dollar amount for damages. We're going to allow you to determine that dollar amount. And so they came back with a verdict in her favor, awarding her $3 million from Planned Parenthood.
That is mind-boggling. Holy cow.
So huge victory for her. It's been such a struggle just the past 2 years, and for her and her family. And so this is it's really a beautiful outcome.
Wow. Yeah. Holy cow. And a win, honestly, probably for the pro-life movement too. I mean, I don't know if you're at liberty or not. Can you share any of the abuses that she was talking about?
Oh yeah. This doctor that worked there had been hired by Planned Parenthood. This was in Arizona and Phoenix. Had been hired there, was not trained in surgical abortion, but they hired him to do the surgical abortions anyway. He was basically training on real life patients.
What?
And perforating almost every uterus that he performed an abortion on. Myra went to her supervisors and said, this doctor is not competent. He's hurting patients. He should not be doing this. And they wrote her up. They reprimanded her for going and reporting him to her
Talk
supervisor.
about not putting women first. Holy cow. Risking their life and their health and having children later and all of the above.
Yes. So, she talked about not reporting cases of statutory rape, lots of negligence. And the beautiful thing is that this all came out in court and there's record of it. So nobody's going to be able to say that didn't happen or whatever. There was this one story, really sad. This woman who came in, this same doctor performed her abortion, and the woman wanted an IUD after the abortion. And so he did the abortion and then inserted the IUD. And then a little while later, when they were sorting through the pieces of the baby in the lab, they realized that they had not gotten everything. And they had actually left the baby's head in the woman's uterus. And so he brought her back in, removed the IUD, took out the head, then tried to shove the same IUD back into her uterus. I mean, it's like, oh my gosh, it's so disgusting and egregious, and just no care for the women who came in. And she said something to me on the phone one time. She said, yeah, sure, Planned Parenthood's pro-choice. They will always choose themselves over anyone else.
Oh, yeah, they're pro-choice if you choose their choice.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, I mean, gosh, there's just so many things that came out. And there's even, what was really interesting actually was that there were people that she worked with that are still pro-choice, but ended up leaving Planned Parenthood because of everything that they saw, but they testified in her favor. So they still support abortion, but they were like, what was happening here was so terrible. So they actually supported her during the trial, even though they were pro-choice, just because they saw what was really going on in those clinics. So a lot of similarities in my story and hers. Actually, she was awarded Planned Parenthood's Employee of the Year.
Oh my gosh.
As well. And so it's just, I mean, her story is phenomenal. And the other thing that was really interesting, Planned Parenthood always comes out and says like, oh, they're a champion for immigrants and all this kind of stuff. But she was undocumented the entire 17 years that she worked there. In court, they kept calling her a criminal.
Wow.
Because she was undocumented. And I'm like, but wait a minute. They support complete lawlessness. Planned Parenthood supports open borders and amnesty for everybody. But then when it doesn't suit them, they call an immigrant a criminal.
Oh, the hypocrisy. That is too rich. Wow. What a story. They got to stop giving out, Employee of the Year, because the next thing you know.
It's a jinx.
It's a list. You're just going to start targeting all the Employees of the Year. Next thing you know.
I want to talk to you. If you're an Employee of the Year, you need to talk to me.
Oh my gosh, that is too good. Well, Abby, I know you've got 8 children, and so we're going to let you go soon, but a couple of last brief questions. A, how can people get a hold of you if they want you to come speak or whatever it is? And then also, last but not least, this is a very cliche question, but I get asked it all the time, as I'm sure you do, is how and what is the best way people can get involved?
Okay, so if they want to contact me, they can go to abbyjohnson.com If they want to find out more about our ministry and then there were none, they can go to abortionworker.com. And I've got a lot of resources on my abbyjohnson.org page for people who want to get involved. A lot of different links, but I would say, you know, the pro-life movement is sort of like a three-pronged stool, right? So you've got legislation. You know, we always need people to advocate for pro-life bills, legislation, primarily at the state level. So you can always get in touch with your state or local pro-life legislative group. The other leg is advocacy. So advocating for women who are in crisis pregnancies, volunteering at pregnancy centers, donating to those centers, knitting baby blankets for them, organizing their mommy store, you know, whatever you can do. Maybe, you know, you're not called to actually have one-on-one contact with the women. You may say, oh, I could never talk to them about that. That's fine. There's lots of other ways that you can get involved with the pregnancy center. So I'd say look them up. And the third leg is activism. So getting out in front of your local abortion clinics, praying for 30 minutes to an hour. You are the last line of hope for those women and those babies before they walk into the clinic. Every person should spend time out in front of their abortion clinic, no matter how uncomfortable it makes you. It should make you uncomfortable, no matter how busy you are, no matter what you've got going on. Everybody, no matter how hard it is, because it's always hard, everybody should take some time and go and stand and pray in front of your local abortion clinic.
Amen. Absolutely. And I know that you would agree because I've heard you say something, and I'll paraphrase you, but it's not enough to say that you're pro-life. You have to be pro-life. You have to act on that. And that is, especially if you have children and grandchildren, absolutely vital for the next generation.
Yeah. And some people, like women, will say, you know, I'm a stay-at-home mom and I want to do more for the pro-life movement. And I always say, number one, you're doing the best pro-life thing that you can do by raising your children to be strong warriors of faith and justice and freedom. So that's all very important. But if you want to do something specifically to the pro-life movement, one of the things I encourage stay-at-home moms or dads to do is to get on those websites like Baby Center and different websites that have chat features in them. Because if you go to those chats, there will be a lot of comments and threads from women asking about getting an abortion. And so this is a way for you to find out where they live, you know, ask them where they live, plug them into a local pregnancy center, tell them that you're there to help support them, you know, whatever they need. So that's a really great way to sort of be hands-on as well in the movement.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. I'm not even familiar with that one. I've not ever heard that before. And I'm kind of super invested in the pro-life movement. So thank you for sharing that. That is actually amazing. Abby, thank you again. God bless you and your family, and Doug and your children for lending you to me today and to the rest of the world for your powerful testimony. Just have a wonderful rest of your day. God bless you.
Thanks, Lisa.
Hey, conservative babe. Thanks for listening to this podcast, seriously, or watching on YouTube. In fact, if you're not watching on YouTube, go over to YouTube now, or vice versa, go to iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Please subscribe and leave a 5-star review. That is how this podcast makes it in the Apple rankings. That's how this podcast makes it in the YouTube world. It's because of your help and your support. And you know what? As much as I love putting these together, it is a lot of work. So as a personal thank you to me, let me be candid with you. I need ya to go share this video, like, and subscribe. Thanks.